Unmuted. Tell you, Jeff, we're good to go.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Kevin couldn't be here tonight. He had a conflict with a school board meeting, so he asked me to take over. This is my first time doing this, so I'll be happy to take corrections if I make mistakes as we go along. The first item is to review the agenda for addition, removal, or adjustment of any items. Does anyone have any comments on the agenda? Anybody? Okay, well, I have a comment. So we're grateful to have Adam Luigi here from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, who is going to give us a presentation on governance and roles of boards, planning commissions. So to not waste Adam's time, we thought that we would save the miscellaneous correspondence until after his presentation, assuming that we have time to do it then, rather than make him listen to all our miscellaneous issues. Anyone have any comments or objections to that? Okay, then I guess we will go ahead. So the first item is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was in July, since we skipped the August meeting. Anyone have any changes to make to the minutes from the July meeting?
Just that at the bottom, it said that we were gonna have our next meeting the first week in August, and we skipped that
And we
meeting.
skipped it, right?
I don't know if that needs to be noted.
Do we need to note that, Peggy?
Sure, yeah, I can fix that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you for catching that, Shannon. Okay, can we have a motion to approve the minutes then?
Motion to approve?
Shannon makes a motion, second. Melissa seconds. All in favor, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, I guess it's unanimously approved. Our second item is the zoning administrator report. Chris, do you have anything to add?
The only thing is they've started to break ground on the housing project next to the fire station.
Oh, great. That's good. Okay, any questions for Chris? Anybody? All right. Our next item then is the ARPA Funding Advisory Committee update. That would be Rob. Rob, do you have anything to tell us about what's going on with ARPA funding?
Sure. So quickly, we've had a bunch of outreach stuff over the last month primarily, and there's some more coming up with an event this week as well. And then after that, I think that's going to move from the gathering stage into the evaluation stage, trying to put together recommendations to gather to get to the select board. So it's moving along and quickly coming to an end of our gathering phase. That's where that's at.
So just 2 cents on that. I sit on this with Rob as well. So the event he's talking about is Thursday night. If anyone's watching, free spaghetti dinner. It's the biggie, free food. And then about half an hour of your time to brainstorm and just throw ideas out of what people are looking for. As far as the outreach goes, I don't know if anyone can see all the postcards that we've distributed at different events and at election day. We've had a few hundred responses so far. So we've got a lot of data to sift through. Rob, we have a lot of data to sift through.
Where is it, Chris?
It's at the elementary school in Bristol.
Oh, okay. Great. Are you all looking at the data as it comes in? Do you notice any trends, or are you all waiting till it all comes in?
I've been looking at it because I'm the one collecting all the cards and all the website information. It's a lot of all over the place. There's been a few trends, I would say, which we saw in our first meetings: affordable housing, daycare, and support for the schools. Which, unfortunately, I don't think $1 million fixes any of those 3 problems. but what the intent is there's a bunch of ideas that come through that even if they don't end up in the ARPA request, they may end up actually with you folks.
Yeah.
Things like the affordable housing that 25% of the people who responded thought that was important to our community, and that maybe that's a focal point for the planning commission. So you may get a handful of suggestions from a planning standpoint that came through that
Mhm.
process,
Yeah, that's very helpful.
because we don't want to lose the data.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. that's
So
great.
that will play into, or could play into this project, depending on what they say.
Very much
I'd
so.
be very-
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, I would, yeah, that's just what I was thinking.
Same here. I was like, it's like the timing is almost perfect as far as part of this project and in looking at the housing portion. And so that's all I got. Sorry, I have to jump all over it.
That's great.
No, glad you did. Glad you did. I'm more of an overview person. Keep it concise.
Anyone besides me saying we should do a swimming pool?
Yeah, actually, quite a few.
Oh, all right. I'm all for that. I love the Middlebury pool. It's too far. Okay, sorry, that was a personal interjection. So as I said, we will skip the miscellaneous correspondence until later, after Adam. We don't have any continuing business at the moment, except, well, I would say one continuing business is we do have, and Kevin sent it out, the signed contract with the Addison County Regional Planning Commission to go ahead with the bylaw modernization study. So that's great. That moves us along. So new businesses, commission training, general governance and rules of board. And Adam, that's over to you.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for having me here and listening. Chris, you're gonna help me run this.
Trying.
Awesome. Good. Can everybody see that? Okay, great. So I know some of you, but let me introduce myself to the rest of you who may not know me. I'm Adam Luigi. I'm director of the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. I've been doing this for about 20 years or so. So written a lot of different town plans, a lot of bylaws, subdivision regs, including a hand in each of yours. So pretty familiar with Bristol. This is really meant to be a primer for all of you. So it involves the Planning Commission, the Zoning Administrator, the Development Review Board in Bristol, and the your legislative body, basically your select board. And it's just meant to be, well, I'm on this board. How do I interact with other people? What are my responsibilities? What are their responsibilities? How do we all work together to get Bristol's business done? And why is this structure this way? So if you would flip to the next slide, Chris, that would be great. And this is going to be what I'll call a really quick history lesson on just where zoning and planning regulations came from. So 1921 was Vermont's first for basically creating comprehensive plans. Now, way back when, basically when the towns in Addison County were first being laid out in the 1700s, they were all pretty well laid out. You had a center of town, you had a place where the church was going to go, glebe lands, you had basically other bodies laying it out. So they were planned, but there was not this formal state planning body. So the state got involved basically in the 20s, 30s, and has continued to get involved. That's important for local planning because Vermont is what's called the Dillon's Rule state, which means that, oh, there you go, Dillon's Rule. Basically, local planning, town planning is enabled by state statute. So state statute gives the town of Bristol the authority to create a plan, gives the town of Bristol the authority to create zoning or subdivision regulations. There are specific things that it does not give. So for example, the power to regulate energy production facilities. So think of the solar facilities. You can participate, but that goes to the PUC, the Public Utilities Commission. Hunting and fishing, you really can't regulate. So the state reserves some things to itself, but it is given planning and zoning authority to the town of Bristol. The big, I guess, you have. You wanna help me with that? Or should I just let it go?
I'm not sure who's somebody's not muted. We got some background noise there. So. Could be Peggy.
Okay, I'll just keep going.
Yep, you
And I can't see any of you on the now because we're sharing the slide projection. So if you have a question or you want to interrupt me, please speak up. Okay, and unless I hear you, I'll keep going.
I can see them, so if I do see somebody hop on, I will let you know.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So early planning concerns focused on public buildings, so separation of uses. The very first zoning case before the United States Supreme Court, Euclid versus Amber Realty, was basically about zoning Amber Realty. It was a village outside of Cleveland, Euclid, Ohio, and Amber Realty was hoping to put in a lot of industrial uses on its parcel. Euclid, Ohio basically passed some regulations saying, no, you can use these uses here and not there. Went up to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said through the police power, so to protect health, benefits, welfare of the people, basically towns, municipalities can enact zoning ordinances. And that was back in 1926. So that's nationally where that came from. Vermont became more increased in economic development and growth in the 60s, and they had some concerns about environmental protection and growth management. So you can look at the ski industry and the interstate. That's when a lot of the state of Vermont's regulations were first passed. So Act 250 in 1970, 1968, Municipal and Regional Development Act. So again, the place where all your power comes from are these different state regulations, state statutes. And they've been going on ever since. So next one, roles and responsibilities. Thank you, Chris. So we're going to look at three different functions, three different roles, and it's similar. Municipal government is similar to state or federal government there in that we have a legislative role, we have a quasi-judicial role, we have administrative roles, which are largely executive roles. So the legislative role is largely writing and approving the municipal plans and bylaws, conducting those hearings, and it's shared by basically the select board. And I'm going to talk specifically to Bristol. So it's shared by the select board and by the planning commission. So when you think about how you adopt either plans or bylaws, basically the planning commission is going to create them generally. There are some exceptions to that rule, but the planning commission creates them. They hold a hearing, they approve them, they pass them to the legislative body, to the select board. They hold their own hearing. They then approve them, and actually in Bristol, they send them one step further on to the voters. And that's relatively unique. There are some other towns in Addison County that do it, but not all that many.
Which part is unique on that? The two hearings or the referral to the electors, or
The referral to basically the public to vote.
okay.
So in a lot of towns in Addison County, they've allowed the select board to retain the power to basically pass the either plan or the bylaw and not send it out to a vote of the general public.
Is that written someplace like in law in Bristol, or is it just customary?
They chose to do it a while back, and I believe the way statutes written, once you go down that road, you have to continue down that road.
So Bristol voted to do it.
Okay.
And I can't remember exactly when, but there was a vote. Bill Sarah might remember. But I can't remember exactly when you voted to take that authority. And once the people take that authority, they have to vote to rescind it themselves, to give it
Right.
back.
Okay.
Slim had a question?
Not a question, there's just that vote took place when the gravel pit controversy was raging. And people thought they should have a say in whether or not that gravel pit came in down there on the Lathrop property, and that's when it changed. I can't remember the year.
Okay.
Anyway, for what it's
It's not
worth.
too long ago, right?
No,
15 years, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, around there.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to quasi judicial function, basically it's interpreting and applying the land use regulations. The slide talks about an appropriate municipal panel, and several of the next slides do. In Bristol, you've adopted basically a planning commission and a development review board. The planning commission takes care of the legislative functions. The development review board takes care of the quasi judicial functions. So we can look at some of the other slides and the other way of doing it, but for Bristol's purposes, the quasi judicial function is large for planning anyway, is carried out by your development review board. And then there's the administrative function that's largely held by Chris for planning purposes. It involves mostly non-discretionary acts such as issuing permits. He needs to basically faithfully follow the plain meaning of the regulation. So if it says it, he can do it. If it doesn't say it, he can't do it. Okay. So moving on to legislative functions, and again, this talks about the legislative body and the planning commission. What do I want to focus on here? I added again on this one, I have reviews and edits municipal plan, adopts or sends to voters, and Bristol sends to voters. Down on the planning commission, I wanted to focus on the last task. So secures grants and performs non-regulatory plan implementation. And the reason I want to focus on it is because not many planning commissions know they have the ability to do that. You spend a lot of time on the plan and then a lot of time on the regulatory functions. So the subdivision regulations or the zoning regulations. About 5 years ago, I think the legislature changed the planning cycle from 5 years to 8 years to give planning commissions more time to focus on they didn't want to feel like the planning commission was in a cycle. Well, we work on the plan. Oh, now we've got to work on the regs. They wanted to give you a little extra time to be able to do some of the non-regulatory plan implementation. So, that could be the fun part of planning, honestly. That can be securing grants for recreation or pools or sidewalks or other infrastructure, physical infrastructure that the planning commission through your plan and through up to your select board is deemed, yeah, that's something that the town wants to invest in. That's a piece of infrastructure that the town wants to invest in. I just wanted to point that out to all of you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. When you were talking about grants for sidewalks and for other municipal things, has this planning commission been doing that in the past, or is that it? I thought that was coming from the select board.
So remember, you're appointed by the select board. The select board passes the budgets, so they have control over the money. They have the ability to say to you, planning commission, would you engage in a study and look at where we need a sidewalk, or whether or not a pool is a good idea, or how we improve the parks in Bristol, or a bunch of other things. And I would say related to physical planning infrastructure that Bristol, things that the town of Bristol would like to see. So things that you write in your plan, implementing things that write in your plan.
So they have the ability to task us with that, but that doesn't mean that they necessarily do. They can also do it.
That's absolutely true.
And there's an example of that now. They're doing a sidewalk study on Munsell Road.
Munsell, yeah.
We have not been asked our input on that at all, as far as I know.
Same with the
bicycle
pedestrian group, same thing, where they're trying to figure that out. They haven't come to the planning commission yet at all.
Okay, they send us their minutes.
Right, which is odd, but that's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
moving on to quasi judicial functions, and I'm going to ask you just to go to the next slide. You can see there that slide had planning. Whoop, I think you went to, didn't you?
Yeah.
This, where you want
One
on this one?
Well, that'll work.
Go back.
No, that's fine. That works. So I would tell you to look at, just cross off Planning Commission and Zoning Board of Adjustment. It doesn't necessarily apply to Bristol. That's the system that you used to have, where the Planning Commission had some quasi judicial functions and the Zoning Board of Adjustment had others. About 10 years ago,
7, 8 years ago.
7, 8 years ago, you moved to a Planning Commission and Development Review Board system. Planning Commission really now does planning legislative work that we just talked about. Development Review Board has all of the quasi judicial functions.
So like I say, we finally do it right. The planners plan and the reviewers review.
Yep, membership can overlap between them if you choose to, so you have some interaction, i.e., you know, the plans or the regulations that you created, Planning Commission don't quite function as we'd like, and we'd like you to change. Next time you do it, we'd like you to change X or Y. So a little feedback, it can be nice for the boards, but it does allow you to focus on responsibilities, and people don't get caught between, say, the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board of Adjustment if they're have different views on what should happen. Okay. Appropriate municipal panel. It just means who is the Board or Planning Commission that is charged with the responsibility to undertake a certain action. It's what we've just been talking about. So if you see that in the legislation or somewhere else,
It's in our bylaw. We use it in our bylaws too.
you use it in your bylaws. Sometimes it's when you don't know whether there's going to be a DRB or whether there's going to be a ZBA. So the legislation speaks to it broadly. So know that Bristol has a DRB, and that's what they handle quasi judicial functions, and that's what you should be worried about. Okay, administrative functions. So the roles of the zoning administrator. So what are Chris's roles, and how does he interact with you and interact with the Development Review Board, and to a lesser extent the legislature, so the legislative body or the select board. So Chris assists applicants with permitting, determines the appropriate process of review, i.e., all right, I've got an application here. What's it for? Can I do it? Do I have to give it to the DRB? Is it allowed at all? So basically, he's helping the applicants and also controlling the flow of information back and forth between the applicants and the board. So coordinating across permitting processes, issuing notices, issuing zoning permits where the application is for an approved use or a by right use. Chris also conducts enforcement, and that's where his relationship with the legislative body or the select board is important, because the legislative body basically controls the next level of the process before the environmental court. So it would go, if Chris issues a by right permit and someone appeals it, they go to the Development Review Board. If someone appeals the Development Review Board, it goes to environmental court. The party in the environmental court is the legislative body. And they control whether or not they want to pay for an attorney or not, whether how they want to act in environmental courts. So Chris needs to have a good relationship with the legislative body as well. He needs to know that they have his back, and if he enforces something, that they will support him, both financially and morally. Otherwise, it can be a pretty lonely job for Chris.
Yes, it can.
Okay.
So does Vermont have an environmental court system? You said it goes to the environmental court.
Yes.
There is. So there's a
Yes.
special.
It's a division of Superior Court,
Okay.
but it basically handles appeals from zoning boards of adjustment, Do they have 50 appeals? I should know. Yes, they do. Yeah. And they're looking at maybe changing that back, or the legislature's been looking at maybe changing that back to district commissions, but for right now it goes to environmental court. And having them both go there makes some administrative sense, because that way you don't get town permits going one way and state permits going another way. So much fun. Okay, informs municipal boards on local permit activity. So that's Chris's role. Actually, this is the slide that I want to kind of just get rid of. You don't have a PC ZBA, so let's not confuse the matter.
There we go.
Let's go to the PC
Like it never
DRB.
happened.
So again, legislative body has a legislative role, adopts the town planner bylaws, and approves town attorney expenses. So I just talked about that a little bit. That's what I wanted to highlight. And for you as the planning commission, you need to know that after you hold your hearing and approve your plan or bylaws, it's going to go to the select board, and they're going to hold their own plan or hold their own hearing, and ultimately either adopt it and send it to the voters or not. So you all as a planning commission need to be cognizant that, hey, there's another body that's going to review this, and we need to understand the politics of that body and their opinions, and we need to be a little bit pragmatic as to what the work that we do, so that we know it will get through the legislative branch. And while you're writing them, communicate with the legislative branch. Hey, we're thinking about doing this. What do you think? So that, once you've done all this work and held your hearings and approved something, you don't get to the next level and they say, well, nope, not doing it. Because they have the ability to not do it. They can hold their hearing and they can never put it before the voters if they choose to.
Or make major modifications.
Or make major modifications to
Like
your
our
work.
other community right now.
Yes. Yep.
So I have a question. When the planning commission say we have to hold a hearing, does that have to be a separate thing, or does that have to be part of our meeting? We say this meeting we'll invite public comment on it. I don't remember us holding a separate hearing for the plan we just approved, although I came in very late in the
Yeah.
process.
We did.
Did we?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember that.
So we're going to get to that in just a little bit, because there's a
Okay.
difference between just a public meeting and a public hearing.
Okay.
They can feel the same,
Right.
but the notice requirements are different, and
Okay.
things of that nature. So you definitely held a hearing. Let's see, we've kind of focused on each of these other things before. Again, municipal plans, bylaws, capital plan and budget, other studies, other grants that can work on implementation if your select board enables that. But keep it in mind, that can be some of the fun work. Implementing your plan can be fun. And again, development review board handles all of the quasi judicial functions. Okay. Open meeting law. So I'm actually gonna pause before I get into the open meeting law for just a second for all of you, because we've kind of dealt with well, what's our responsibility? What's Chris's responsibility? What's the select board's responsibility? And how do we interact and what do we do? So I went through it relatively efficiently, but I want to give, before we go into how do we conduct our meetings, see if any of you have any questions about roles, responsibilities.
So one thing I noticed is that there are two different relationships that the planning commission could have with the select board. One is in which the select board says, go ahead and do your thing, whatever it is. Or, but not give any specific instruction, or the select board could say, we would like you to take on project X or Y or Z. Is that an accurate description of the situation?
Kind of. I guess I'd put it a little differently in that, you know, you are responsible for creating the plans and the regulations. And you're obviously appointed by the select boards. So there is some connection there. That's intentional. You are doing the plans. Like I said, it's a good idea while you're doing the plans or zoning bylaws and gathering information that they're part of your information gathering process. I'd also, I guess, suggest you look at the budgetary process. They control the budgets. If you want to do outside work, you may need, you know, if you want to conduct a study, you may need some money for that study. So you should, you know, understand what you want to undertake and then speak with the select board about the budgetary requirements that you have. Maybe you go out and get a municipal planning grant, or this was a zoning for great neighborhoods grant that's funding my work here. But it also requires, I think, a little bit of a match from the select board, from the town.
Bristol's policy is all grants need to be approved by the select board prior to application. So
Before application, okay.
they'd like to know before somebody goes down the path whether.
Well, that makes common sense for everybody's benefit.
Yeah.
So, so you interact with them on that level, and you know, depending on the resources that they give you, will dictate to a large extent the things that you can do within your authority.
Right.
A lot of the smaller projects that we were talking before, like where we might seek out for like infrastructure or recreation, that kind of thing. Most of the time, the boards come up with those ideas and run it the other direction. They go to the select board and say, hey, we want to do this. Is that something you back?
Right.
In 99.9% of the time, they're like, you're willing to do the work, here, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have a recreation board, right?
Right.
A lot of other towns in Addison County don't necessarily have that. But you know, you've created a plan for the town of Bristol. It's got a lot of implementation ideas in there on a pretty broad array of planning subjects. You have the ability to advocate for those with your select board, and the budget that they give you to a large extent will determine, you know, what you can undertake. Okay, is everybody ready to move on to open meeting law?
Good.
All right, great. So I'm actually, let's see, gonna go. And I'm gonna read you very, very short, the statute, so the Vermont statute that tells the town what you have to do with the open meeting law. And it's basically this: the legislature finds and declares that public commissions, boards, and councils and other public agencies in the state exist to aid in the conduct of the people's business and are accountable to them pursuant to Chapter 1, Article 6 of the Vermont Constitution. So that's kind of the why for the open meeting law. You are accountable to basically your citizens, the town of Bristol citizens in this case. And because of that, because you're accountable, they need to basically have access to your meeting. So open meeting law is really basically a way to give people access to their representatives when they're undertaking their business. So it applies every time a quorum of a public body. If 5 of you were to go out to dinner and talk about planning, you have 9 reps, right? Yeah, 5 of you were to go out to dinner and talk about planning in the town of Bristol or zoning or things of that nature, it could be deemed a public meeting. So just something, you have authority over it, you involved in a discussion or taking action or quorum. So it's something you need to be thoughtful about. And the purpose of the public meeting dictates why you need to be thoughtful about. You're doing work for the citizens of Bristol, and they need to have an ability to participate. And Bristol does a lot for that anyway with your public access TV.
I mean, the only time we've run into that as a community is with our select board, actually. Because we still do 2 members of the fire department who are on the select board. And at our annual meeting, we invite the rest of the select board members. So we have all 5 select board members at that meeting. But it's not a public, they were just there as guests. So it was just that there was a big question on, do we have to take minutes for that and publish it and do everything else? And as long as they aren't discussing town business at that, they're just there as a citizen, not as a representative, it was deemed okay. So they had to use their discretion. And they're good about the separation.
So if I understand this correctly, 4 members of the planning commission go out to dinner and discuss planning. It's not a public meeting, but if 5 members go, it is.
Because those 4 members would not have any authority to act.
Okay.
Because it's not a quorum. So the test is basically, is there a quorum?
Yeah.
Are you discussing basically something that you have jurisdiction over, and do you have the ability to act?
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Okay. So next one, please. Good.
I have a question, sorry.
Sure.
So
If that's a plan where 4 people go out together or 5, or whatever, are you talking about is they're just getting together and talking? It's not a planned, we're going to discuss what things that we need to do kind of thing?
So I'm going to go back 1 slide, and if
Yeah.
you look at the bottom, so a quorum, so it's 5, not 4 in your case, because there are 9 members, so you need a quorum. And then involved in a discussion or taking an action. And number 3 goes to what you were asking. I think it's the subject matter of the discussion is one which where you're specifically talking, 5 of you could go out and talk baseball all you wanted. Nobody's going to care because you're not doing the people's business. But if you're talking about planning or zoning or something that you do have authority over, then basically it could be deemed an illegal public meeting. So the way to get around this is just to think about it.
Okay, my question actually kind of was, I'm trying to, I don't even know how to put it, but if people are just getting together and there's no notification to other commission members.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, is that something that if you end up with a quorum, whether you planned it or not, would you have to notify the rest of the planning commission?
Well, so if 5 of you got together to watch a baseball game and you never spoke about planning or zoning or anything that the planning commission, you would not need to do that. If you planned to get together and you planned to talk about it and you didn't notify everybody, you would be holding you'd be violating the open meeting law.
Okay, I got you.
So now
So the answer is be thoughtful.
Yeah.
When you're all together, you can't necessarily talk planning commission shop. Is kind of the answer. You can talk baseball or other things, but not planning commissions things.
So basically, if there were 4, this is kind of going crazy, but if there are 4 of you and you start talking about it and then a 5th person shows up and makes it a quorum, then you need to stop.
Yep.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So I don't want to get too down in the weeds, but this is so hard to parse sometimes, because we've had this about our emails, for instance. Say, I have a barbecue in my backyard, I invite 20 people, 5 of whom happen to be members of the planning commission. And then someone who's not on the commission says, so what have you guys been doing lately on the planning commission? Or do we have to say, sorry, we can't do this here?
Well, so one of the ways I've handled that in the past is if, let's say we're in that public setting in a barbecue and,
Yeah.
and you wanted to know what's going on with planning, you and I can go over and have a one-on-one
Right,
conversation away from the rest of the group. And that's really, as a member, that's your best thing to do, is separate yourself from the rest of the team, for lack of better
Mhm.
terms. And that way you guarantee you're not violating it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. So it's an intent thing. You are representing the citizens of Bristol, and you want to recognize that they have a constitutional right to understand and know when you're doing things.
Yeah.
And that's what this law is set up to protect. So a lot of it can be addressed with common sense. And then it also has some basically notice requirements.
Rob, did you have a question?
Yes, and I know there's a lot more to this
Thank you.
than this slide or a quick conversation can probably answer, but you basically email was briefly touched on with open meeting law and email. You know, we've been trying to operate under the assumption that a reply all and that sort of chain of correspondence would violate open meeting. Is that still hold true? Or is there, since it's not an active involved conversation, does open meeting law not apply no matter who's involved in the email chain?
So I would tell you, email chains can definitely be meetings, because you can basically be, you can have five members of the planning commission on it. If you look at the kind of the 3 steps that are up on the slide, you could have a quorum on the email list. You could have a discussion, right? I could say one thing, I'm not here, but if I were a member, I could say one thing, you could respond, etc. The others would see it. And again, it's the last one. The subject matter of the discussion is one which the body has authority and responsibility. So you can engage with Chris in administrative functions. Do we have a meeting tomorrow night? You know, are we going to make quorum? That type of thing, but you can't talk about basically the substance of the plans or the regulations or the other work that you're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just looking for a little more clarification on that, because that's always a dicey one, where the tendency when information goes out, the tendency of a lot of people is to hit reply all and try to address something in the moment instead of waiting till meeting time or sending it back to just Chris or the chairperson to disseminate in a different manner at a later time or something like that.
Yep. No, it's a good question. So it's really focused on the substance of the discussion. And if it's a substantive discussion and there's a quorum there, then you would be violating the open meeting law.
But if the discussion is just, here's the agenda, this is what we do, here's the agenda, everybody okay with it? That's okay. That's
Or who's gonna be able to make it tonight?
Yeah.
Or is there whatever you want to add? Yeah, so Rob, my general rule of thumb in life is I don't use reply all in anything board related, even if it is something as simple as whether I'm going to make the meeting or not. I feel that if I send that back to whoever sent the original email, if it was pertinent, they would inform the entire group. I just find that that's a cleaner method. That's my own personal.
Good. Okay, everybody ready to move on? Okay. Let's see. So we talked a little bit about what's the difference between a meeting and a legislative hearing and a quasi-judicial hearing earlier. And for purpose of the public meeting law, I guess there's different gradations of responsibility. And because there are different gradations of responsibility or actions things are taking, there are different notice requirements. So a meeting like this we're sitting talking. You could hold a public meeting. You can invite everybody in the public, and you can talk about things. It's what you do probably most of the time. So public needs to know about it, needs to be able to go and give you their opinion if they choose to. So you have to give them at least 48 hours notice, have to do some posting for regular meetings. But it's got I guess the lowest bar, or the lowest number of hoops that you need to jump through in order to give public notice. A legislative hearing would be something like, we're going to adopt this plan, or we're going to adopt these bylaws. We're going to hold a hearing to hear what you, the people, have to say about these regulations. Here they are. They come, they're afforded the opportunity to speak. It's a little more formal because you're not at the information gathering stages of things anymore. You've put your plan or your regulations on the table and said, this is what we think would be best for the town of Bristol, and we're formally asking for your opinions. So needs to be in 15 days in the newspaper of record. And certified mailings to neighboring towns, the Agency of Commerce, the Regional Planning Commission. So there are some other hoops that you need to jump through legislative hearings. If you think about it, you're doing more than what you would do at a normal meeting. The last one, the quasi-judicial hearing, is the one where there is potentially the most impact on a landowner or an applicant or their neighbors. So that one has the most notice requirements.
What would be an example of where you would need a quasi-judicial hearing? Could you give one?
So it
subdivision.
wouldn't be for you.
Yeah, for here.
Yeah, no, but I know, but
You all would have seen, what I see is, anytime the DRB gets together, it's the only time they get together is for hearings. So like if somebody applies for a subdivision,
okay,
that's a hearing, so that the neighbors and or interested parties can offer input. Folks who are questioning the project or want more information can attend. They then become.
And at the end of the hearing, the DRB will make a decision. Yes,
Okay.
we think we're going to issue a permit for what you've applied for, or no, we're going to deny that permit. So somebody, the applicant, or some have a significant amount invested in the question, and that's why it has the most requirements for public notice.
Yes, it does.
so it's where there's discretion on the part of the DRB or the select board. They can approve or not approve this subdivision request for.
So what we've done in our regs, and most times have adopted it, is any hearing requires a level of notification. Really, the biggest deviation is the 7 or 15 days in Bristol, like the downtown Design Review Commission. They have quasi-judicial hearings, but their requirements are only 7-day notification.
Site plan, I think, is 7
I
days.
think site plan's the other one that we do. I think it's the only two we do. Everything else, it was easier, and most times I've gone this route, that you just dump it in the 15-day bucket and check all the boxes. Just let's make sure you get it. 'Cause you don't want to end up in e-court and find out that it ends up getting kicked
Process.
back
Because you didn't have enough.
because it was a process that failed, not the project.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be responsible for that.
Sure.
So by making all of the hearings, the quasi-judicial hearings requirements the same for everybody, it makes it easier for the development review board and Chris to understand and maintain and not get caught up in procedural differences. Okay.
Yeah.
Next one. Chris?
There, I lost my mouse for a second.
Okay. Let's see. So again, meetings versus hearing, what happens, right? Meetings, you're just discussing business, general legislative business. Basically, anybody can speak at a meeting. The chair has to retain some control, but for the most part, everybody gets to speak. The legislative hearings, again, receiving a formal public comment on a course of action. And that's generally the planning commission or the select board are holding those hearings. And then judicial hearings, we just talked about a party seeking board approval, and the board is issuing either an approval or denial. So on a proposed project. So the board chair, in basically differentiating the chair from the other members of the board, the board chair is in control. Basically, the board chair is responsible for the meeting. So the board chair is responsible for making sure, you know, things go in a timely manner, making sure that everybody understands the business being discussed, basically ensuring that all participants are given the right to speak. And that varies depending on whether it's a meeting or whether it's a quasi-judicial hearing. Let's see, bringing the board to resolution, explaining next steps, and basically keeping control of the meeting, making sure it proceeds in an orderly fashion. So again, this is, and why are you doing that? You're protecting due process by running an efficient, orderly meeting where everyone who has the right to speak gets to speak, where you manage the evidence, where you manage conflicts of interest, where you take good minutes. Basically, it all protects due process. It all protects, again, the citizens' interest in understanding what's going on in their government. And that is that. Happy to take any questions.
Anyone?
I did an excellent job. I don't hear any questions. I'm
Anyone
sorry.
have questions? Yeah. Who has questions? Anybody? So just, so I'll go ahead with the question then if no one else has. So now that we're moving ahead, jumping ahead to our next thing, which is the study on whether and how to modify the zoning bylaws. When we come up with proposals, assuming we do, then we will have to hold a we'll have to hold a hearing, not a quasi-judicial hearing, a public hearing on that and get comment before we send it to the select board, which will also hold a public hearing, and then it will go to a vote. That will be the process after the study is finished.
Right, that's the end of the process.
That's the end of the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between now and then, and for basically next meeting, what I talked with Kevin about is we're going to be, so the project that I'm working on with you on, and you probably already know this, is what modifications can we make to either your zoning, and I would say your subdivision regulations, since we didn't do them very long ago, that can help basically improve people's ability to develop housing. And it's largely limited to the village planning area. That's what we got the money for. So what changes can you make to the zoning? What changes could you make to the subdivision that will improve people's ability to develop more housing? And it goes to Chris's comment earlier, where in your ARPA study, 25% or so of the people said, hey, we need to address more housing. And Bristol's had some housing projects going on. It probably has more than most other towns in Addison County. So you're off to a good start. This project will address, well, what else can we do? So next meeting, what I'd like to do is bring you kind of a smorgasbord of ideas to discuss. And that can be anything from lot sizes, setbacks, parking, lot sizes, density, yes. Changes that you can make to your regulations that would improve housing. It could be accessory housing uses, accessory
Right.
apartments. Do you want to change the language specific to there? It could be, where do we allow duplexes, or where do we allow small multifamily units or large multifamily units? So it can cover a number of things.
And that's probably the biggest one that we need to address.
Multi-
In my mind is we went to the whole density-based model.
Yeah.
So it's one dwelling unit per quarter acre.
Mhm.
Well, if you have a quarter acre, you can't put a duplex on, because it's 2 dwelling units.
Mhm.
Well, the impact of that duplex really isn't much more than a single family home. So it's that multifamily homes, it's like coming up with a better mechanism where we can see some better infill.
Mhm.
So that's just my 2 cents on one of it.
Oh, yeah.
It comes to my, that's when I see the most at my office, that people want to do is convert or build a duplex, and they can't.
Mhm.
So they end up going down that,
Because they only have a quarter acre.
yeah, or whatever they've maxed out their density for their unit, for their lot.
For their lot, okay.
And so then they try to go down the route of, oh, we'll just do an accessory dwelling unit instead. When they aren't happy that it can only be a 1-bedroom, can't be more than 1,000 square feet, and blah, blah. So we've sort of created this, a lot of people are doing accessory dwelling units more as a workaround of the system than for what the intent was, which was to create some
Yeah.
smaller housing opportunities.
Anyone else have comments or questions on that? That would help Adam prepare for,
So I'd love to see your survey results, or the survey results that deal with housing. The kind of some of the feedback that you got to help me develop some of the questions and topics for you.
It's pretty broad. What I've got.
Okay, well,
I mean, we can chat.
I have one comment on in my mind, and this was just in my mind, the way I always framed this was, it wasn't just to improve our ability to develop more housing. Because more housing could be $1 million units that only very few people could buy, but it was to develop more flexible and affordable housing.
I think that's a fair comment. Yes.
Um,
In the market also, that's become probably the #1 challenge. The real estate market's taken off so outlandishly that the affordable housing has been lost, for lack of a better term. You go from nothing to $400,000, and it's like that, and there's nothing in between.
And there's hardly anything for $400,000 in Bristol, as
Yeah.
far as I know.
Yeah.
It's much more than that.
So that's the challenge, is how to promote. I would love to, hopefully that's something you all can try to come up with a great plan for, which is how to promote smaller houses, better uses of the land. Something along those lines, because that is, I tell everyone, we're missing in Bristol, in most communities, I refer to them as starter and ender houses. The first time home buyer and the retiree. They're looking for the 900 square foot, 1 or 2 bedroom, single story house.
And if you look at our Vermont's demographics and Bristol's demographics, there's a reason for that. There are a lot more retirees or older people than there are. So I'll bring you some statistics, but I would say that where nuclear families used to be 30 or 40% of the market, they're probably down to 20% of the market. Retirees are probably gone from 10 to 20% of the market. So there's the demographics help to explain the shifting needs in the market.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna write myself a note.
And I agree with that.
Yeah, and I think we discussed the demographics in the plan. More and smaller units, family units.
Should be interesting. That's why the housing project next to the fire station should be a unique, because that is predominantly small 1-bedroom apartments. So.
Okay. Do any of you have any other questions or thoughts about the process we're going to go through?
I have one more question, because I know that people from other towns discussing this and haven't heard too much discussion of it here, but the impact of the short-term rental market like Airbnbs on housing. Do we have any data on that for Bristol?
I have it for Addison County.
Okay.
Let me ask. I don't know the answer to it off the top of my head for Bristol.
I mean, one of the things I do is maybe monthly, maybe every 2 months. I go out, I cruise the Airbnbs. Well, mostly because I want to know if somebody's converted a
Sure.
barn or a garage into something and they're renting it out as a
Yeah.
dwelling unit that's not.
Right.
And knock on the door and be like, hey, let's permit this incorrectly and continue. We don't have a ton in Bristol, if you look at the listings.
Uh-huh.
And I don't think we're losing a lot of housing opportunity. We're unlike Burlington or some of the, I know in Canton, when I was working out there on the lakefront, they had a lot of houses that were converted into just pure rentals. Burlington saw a bunch of small rental units converted into Airbnbs. We don't see a ton of it here. I don't think we've lost a lot of housing stock necessarily in Bristol.
Okay. But it would be good to know.
Yeah.
That's generally true for Addison County too, with some exceptions on the lakefront.
Okay.
And right around Middlebury.
I would say right around the college is the other spot.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments for Adam? Thank you so much, Adam.
Great.
So we
Thank
will
you.
see you
Next meeting.
next meeting, which would be, what is our date?
The first Tuesday of the
First
month.
Tuesday in October, whenever that is. The
We'll be here. I don't know, 6.
Oh.
that would be October 4th. Does that work?
So I may not be here, but I will get someone here to speak with you. I'm gonna be away at a wedding.
Nice.
Okay.
But I will make sure I can get someone here to cover for me.
Great.
Okay. 7 p.m. And Chris, in the meantime, if we'll talk about what survey results you have.
Yeah, the other option too, Jeff, that we have is
We could change.
because you have the setup to meet twice a month. You have
Right.
it reserved for the 1st and the 3rd.
Right.
Would the 3rd Tuesday work for you, Adam,
That would be the 18th.
of October?
Of October 18th would certainly work. Yeah.
Would it make sense to defer 2 weeks and bump to the 18th, and that way you don't miss? So we stay. I'd like to stay consistent with Adam. And
Yeah.
I think anyone from your office could do it, but I think just staying with one person is a more consistent option for you.
Any comments from anyone about moving to the 18th, the next meeting to the 18th?
That's fine for me.
Anyone have any problems with that?
No, it's fine.
Okay,
Okay. Well, I'll check with Kevin, make sure it's okay with him.
Oh, you're the chair. You make the decision.
Okay, all right, okay. We'll move to the 18th then.
Well, great. Thank you
Okay.
for accommodating me.
I just thought of that one.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Good. So I will see you all then. Enjoy the rest of your meeting and thank you for having me. Nice to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will try to pull together some data. Okay. As they continue on here, I'll just try to say what I've got and why I said it's very loose. See what I need a little.
Okay.
I'll jump back. You're up and running. I'm just gonna show.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. So the question is, since it's now 10 after 8, do we want to go over the miscellaneous correspondence? Or do we want to wait till the next meeting to do that? Any,
Is there
Absolutely.
anything of note that we need to address in any of that correspondence?
well, I can mention a few things. Kevin included the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee minutes for their last two meetings. The most notable thing for me is that they haven't had a quorum for either meeting. They only had two members present, which is unfortunate. But they seem to hold a meeting anyway, which I guess is then not a public meeting from what we've just been told. I'm not sure exactly how that works. Kevin received a request, and this is all, you know, information I've received from Kevin, from the West Central Vermont Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy Survey. We were asked for comment on that. It seems sort of way beyond our capability. We really need a lot of technical input, so Kevin did not comment on that. There's a series of meetings being held on the Lake Champlain Sea Grant flooding impacts. Kevin sent that out also. There was a series of events, and you can look at that that information that Kevin got, that correspondence, if you're interested in this flooding impacts. We also received from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission, but not from Adam, a request for comment on a health equity survey. Kevin sent this out to you. I don't know if anyone took a look at it. We both found it very confusing because we said health equity. Well, that's about people's access to healthcare, right? Well, it's not. It's as it's defined, it's health equity is the state in which everyone has a fair and just opportunity to attain their highest level of health. And it says there's a link on
This
it.
one?
Um,
And then the wrong one, I think.
this is the one. No, that's the municipal planning grant.
I only have how many of these?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to find them. Yeah, it's, maybe I can tell you in a second. It's like the fifth one, maybe. Yeah. Nope, that's not it.
Peek over your shoulder, how's that?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. So it says like, at a municipal level, this can mean increasing physical activity with improving bike pedestrian connections, encouraging housing structures to have front porches, increasing access to committee meetings through remote options. Maybe you could bring this up, Chris, the health equity survey, and share it. Kevin got an email about it, and then there's a link. No, you were there. There it is. And then if you go to the link, yeah, there's the link.
It's this something when I go back to share.
Is this,
Yeah.
is this something that is time sensitive? Or is this something we can
Well, they didn't have a
look
time.
over more?
Yeah, it's just, if you might want to take a look, because Kevin and I were really confused by
See
this.
that?
How, you know, how encouraging front porches increased health equity. It just seemed, we couldn't figure out what to comment on this. So if anyone has any thoughts on this, you might want to look at this, and you can discuss it at the next meeting. That's all I
Right.
wanted to say.
Okay, yeah.
That's all I meant to say, but you can see why I think you can see why we were a bit confused by it.
Yeah.
Some of the questions.
So if you have a chance, take a look at it
Yeah,
before the
check
next
it out.
meeting, and we can talk about it then. Kevin also got information from the Conservation Commission that they are applying for a municipal planning grant to better understand wildlife corridors and associated documentation. And Kevin said we had no objection to that. We just want to be kept informed because it links closely to the town plan. So if they should get such a grant, we'll want to work closely with them on what they're doing. And as I mentioned, Kevin also posted, we have the signed contract with the Addison County Regional Planning Commission to do the study, which we've been discussing this evening. So any comments or questions on any of those? Okay, any public comments from the public?
We have no public.
We have no public. We're open to the public, but they didn't come. Okay, does anyone have anything else that we haven't discussed that they would like to raise then before we ask for a motion for adjournment? Okay, well, I was very grateful to Adam for coming in. I thought it was I learned a lot. And so I'm looking forward to the next one. Can we have a motion to adjourn then? Rob, motions, any second?
Second.
Okay, we have lots of seconds. All in favor, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Okay,
Pretty unanimous to me.
we've adjourned. Thanks, everybody. So the next meeting will not be on the 4th, it will be on the 18th of October. Great, thanks, thank you all.
Thank you all.
Bye.